BBC star, described as a familiar face known to millions, was accused by the Sun newspaper of paying a teenager tens of thousands of pounds for explicit images. Since the scandal broke, a sinister game of Guess Who has ensued. But tonight, a sensational plot twist as the lawyer of the young person, who is now 20, released this letter. For the avoidance of doubt, nothing inappropriate or unlawful has taken place between our client and the BBC personality, and the allegations reported in the Sun newspaper are rubbish. It is a story which has dominated the news cycle for days now, with the Home Secretary even intervening.
These allegations are incredibly serious. We know that the Culture Secretary, my colleague Lucy Fraser in Cabinet, has spoken to the Director General of the BBC yesterday, and that there is an ongoing investigation internally to establish the facts.
The new revelations raise serious questions for not only the BBC, but The Sun. This evening, a spokesperson for the newspaper said, "We have reported a story about two very concerned parents who made a complaint to the BBC about the behaviour of a presenter and the welfare of their child." With claims in today's Sun that the male presenter has, since their story broke, made two panicked phone calls to the 20-year-old, reportedly asking, "What have you done?" as it emerged that the family of the young person is said to be upset by the BBC's response. There is a real sense of déjà vu as the corporation once again tries to not only control the crisis but the narrative around it. They find themselves on the front pages of the newspapers once again, and uncomfortably so for an organisation which prides itself on being transparent. There are still many unanswered questions, namely when that initial complaint was made nearly 2 months ago now, what exactly was the nature of the complaint and how high up the chain did they know about it? At that stage, was it clear that a crime could have been committed? There were claims that the young person's mother had seen a photo of the presenter in their underpants taken from a video call. It was alleged the star began asking for explicit photos when they were 17, which would be a crime. But today that was denied in this new letter. Here's how this has unfolded so far. In May, the BBC confirmed that the family of the young person made a complaint. In the complaint, they reportedly asked the broadcaster to make an unnamed presenter stop sending money to their 20-year-old. In June, according to the Sun newspaper, the payments didn't stop, and the young person receives a £1,000 payment, allegedly from said presenter. Last Thursday, the BBC received new allegations, they say, of a different nature to the original complaint. On Friday, the Sun publishes its bombshell story, when the Metropolitan Police are reportedly told of the allegations. The presenter has since been suspended as a series of BBC stars chose to publicly clear their names, sometimes live on air.
It was a distressing weekend. I can't deny it, for me and others falsely named.
I mean, I was shocked that my name is put into it.
As speculation about the identity of the broadcaster continues to swirl online.
Crisis at the corporation, and the Director General talked to the Culture Secretary over claims a presenter paid a teenager for sexually explicit images.
As the BBC finds itself once again in the uncomfortable situation of reporting on the BBC, a combination of defamation and privacy laws means the media are currently not naming the presenter. In 2018, a seismic shift happened when Sir Cliff Richard won a privacy case against the BBC.
And Cliff Richard basically went to court and said, you know, I hadn't even been questioned and you put my name in the public domain. And the court agreed with him. And they basically said the BBC had breached his privacy by doing that. And frankly, the world kind of turned on its head that day. And some of us, frankly, never thought the BBC would lose, and they did.
No organisation is under more fire than the one that made Jimmy Savile a star.
Internally, they are desperate to avoid a repeat of past mistakes. The Jimmy Savile scandal continues to haunt the BBC. While the corporations say they take any allegations seriously and have robust internal processes in place to deal with such claims. But tonight, the 20-year-old in question's lawyer has cast doubt on those original claims. Outside the HQ, a statue of George Orwell looms with ominous words about liberty and the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. While the exact details of this story are yet to come out, the truth eventually will.
Well, joining me now is the solicitor and legal commentator Joshua Rosenberg. Thanks for joining us. If the person at the centre of these claims says through a lawyer that they are rubbish, what is there for the police to investigate?
The police would want to investigate whether what this person says is true or not. We have the word of this individual, as I'm sure accurately portrayed by the individual's lawyer. We have the word of this individual's mother, parents, I think, as reported by the Sun. We have allegations that may amount to a criminal offence, and we have a very clear denial. The lawyer says, for the avoidance of doubt, nothing inappropriate or unlawful has taken place between our client and the BBC personality, and the allegations reported in the Sun newspaper are rubbish. It's worth making the point, though, the police haven't got very far into this. They haven't opened a formal investigation. They're simply making inquiries. Possibly they are talking to lawyers from the Crown Prosecution Service about what offences might be committed. You can see how they may be offences. You can see how they may not be.
So the Sun says its sources are the person's parents and that it has seen material supporting their claims. The person clearly disputes that. What is the sort of the legal... Where does the weight rest in allegations between parents and not a child anymore, but somebody who was a child at the time of the allegations originally?
That's right. This person is said to be 20 years old. It's not unusual for people to disagree. It's not unusual for parents and their offspring to disagree. There are two issues. First of all, has a criminal offence been committed? And that's, if so, something that the police would want to look at. And the second is, are the allegations against the BBC personality well-founded, in which case it's clearly very damaging for him, and if it's not, clearly the BBC should do all it can to protect the person who works for it.
There was a massive inquiry into the behaviour of tabloid journalism over a decade ago. Again, this statement tonight says that the young person denied the story to the Sun newspaper last week. What responsibility does the newspaper have to carry that denial?
I would have thought that a responsible newspaper would want to say, as part of a story, that the story has been denied if the newspaper was given that information at the time that it wrote the story. For all we know, the Sun wasn't. The Sun says we've reported a story about two very concerned parents who made a complaint to the BBC about the behaviour of a presenter and the welfare of the child, and then they say the complaint wasn't acted on by the BBC. Now, they don't say in that statement that they had heard from the young person, but they do say we've seen evidence that supports the parents' concerns, and it's a matter for the BBC to investigate. So yes, if it was shown that the Sun withheld information which knocked down the story, well, any journalist would be very concerned about that.
There has been defamation on an industrial scale on social media of more than one person who works for the BBC. What happens there?
It's up to the individuals who've been defamed, and they were defamed on social media yesterday, to take action if they wish. Now, they certainly can take legal action, and they can get apologies, they can get damages. Whether the individuals who put out these untrue allegations yesterday are worth suing is a matter for the potential claimants to consider. You wouldn't necessarily spend money suing somebody who hasn't got any money to pay you the damages, although you might want to do so just to get that person to apologise and withdraw, and the more people who do so, the more valuable those withdrawals would be. On the other hand, if we're talking about the people who we heard from on your report earlier, the BBC presenters who are presenting programmes today, we know by definition that they are not the individuals they have not been suspended, they're not the individual who is the subject of these allegations. So maybe the fact that they were able to go onto the air today and say, it's not me, is sufficient to persuade everybody that they're not in the frame and that these were simply defamatory allegations by people making mischief.
Do you think there still needs to be transparency by the BBC into its precise methods of investigation and the impact on those people affected?
There does have to be transparency by the BBC, but that's not the only factor. I'm not here to speak for the BBC, but any employer would be concerned about the welfare of a staff member or somebody on contract who's facing potentially career-breaking allegations. And they would want to make sure that that person's welfare was looked after, while at the same time ensuring that if somebody has behaved improperly, if they've broken their contract with the BBC, that's properly investigated.
Joshua Rosenberg, thank you very much.